begin by just acknowledging and thanking everyone who participated in the Festival of Living Yoga last weekend. Whether you worked for months in planning or just bought a ticket and attended for an hour, all of the energy, and it was a tremendous amount of energy from so many people. So many people put their hearts into it in graphics and planning and loading and unloading trucks, and so much happened, practicing chanting. All of that energy came together in a very beautiful experience for everyone. Jyotish and Devi remarked at the harmonious and beautiful energy that was in the hall when we were there. And that energy, trying to figure out how to decorate something or how to make the tables look the best, all that effort, all that service is like a shining light. And when we put all that service together, it creates a magnificent light. And that light is the power of the masters. It's our creativity and our love pulling on that light, drawing it into this physical plane. It can't be here and acknowledged unless we draw it here. And that magnetism that's created is very, very powerful. It's what we were born to do, to serve God, to spread that light, to share that light. And it reminded me of when I found this light of yoga, and it was in 1975. And a girlfriend and I were traveling around the country searching for that light. And even though we weren't quite conscious of it at the moment, we were just conscious of trying to have fun. But I had been searching my whole life, and God knew that. God knew I was getting kind of desperate. I wanted to know what the reason for all of this is. Why all the suffering in life? Why all the pain? Why the misunderstanding and the wars and famine? It just didn't make any sense to me, and I was desperate for answers. And I remember we picked up a hitchhiker. This is 1975, when it wasn't quite so scary to hitchhike. Still, my mother would never have approved. I never told her about it. But we picked up a hitchhiker, and I saw that he had a magazine, and I said, "Can I see your magazine?" I wanted that. It was like pulling me. I opened it up right to the article that said, "A community based on yogic principles." I didn't have time to read the article. I just had time to memorize the address. Back in those days, it was more poetic than it is now. It was 900 Allegheny Star Route. Now it's become 14618 Tyler Foot Road. But I thought it was such a beautiful address, and I memorized it, and I went directly there. And I never left. To show you how God was pulling me at that point, my girlfriend and I had made it all around the country, and we were in Colorado when I memorized that address. And I said, "I've got to get to Nevada City, California." And she said, "Well, I'll take you as far as Salt Lake City." And so we drove to Salt Lake City. It was summertime. We had the windows rolled down. So we're in Salt Lake City, stopped at a stoplight. and there were two girls in a car next to us. And I leaned over and I said, "Where are you guys going?" And they said, "Nevada City, California." And I said, "Can I get a ride with you?" God was pulling me in. And I've never, ever regretted that decision of finding a true path. You know, the Gita says, out of 1,000, one seeks me. And out of 1,000 who seek, perhaps one finds me. And a friend of ours always says, well, our odds at Ananda are a lot better than that. Because we are the thousands who are seeking. And that magnetism put out a light into the world last weekend that is that same magnetism that drew me through that little magazine article, that draws people through the internet or through going up to 14618 Tyler Foot Road and taking a program there, or being there for this coming week, which is Spiritual Renewal Week, a tradition that Swami started in 1969. And every year it's happened, a week of hearing these teachings, letting them wash through your consciousness. I have had many jobs during my years at Ananda, and at one point there was an Ananda construction company, and they needed someone to make stained glass windows. So I decided I would do that. I learned how to do that. And so I spent several years pretty much alone in my art studio, listening, but I wasn't alone because I was listening to Swami Kriyananda's talks. And I so recommend that for everyone. And you could think, he was recording those in 1969. That's going to be a little dated. I'm not going to like that. It's timeless truth. And it's just as fresh now as it was then. And there's lots of Ananda teachers that people love to listen to, and they're all wonderful. Go to Swami Kriyananda's talks, especially those early ones. He was so vibrant and so full of energy. Permeate your consciousness with that kind of energy. So today's reading is very beautiful. This Bible, this Bhagavad Gita reading, even though it states things in the negative, it's really giving us a wonderful clue for how to live our lives. Never speak of these truths to one who is without self-control. Well, the Gita is saying, have self-control. Control your emotions, control your desires, control your worldly tendencies. Don't live by the ego, what I want and what I need and what I think. Live by soul consciousness. Lord, what is the best thing that I do? Guide me. Learn to live by intuition, not by little egoic desires. They just get us into trouble. If we want to live in joy, become in tune with joy itself. So live with self-control. Never speak of these truths to one who is devoid of devotion. Oh, well, we better get some devotion, shouldn't we? If we want to understand the truth, if we want to be in tune with God, we need devotion. And devotion, if we think, oh, well, I don't have very much love in my heart, be devoted. Do the things that God is asking you to do. Hear the teachings. Listen to sacred music. Listen to Yogananda's chants or Swami Kriyananda's music. Develop devotion. Open your heart. Soften the stone of the heart and make it grow with flowers. That song was very beautiful today. Where he dwells, the earth gives forth sweet herbs and flowering trees. That's the fruit of softening the heart so that it can love. Never speak of these truths to one who renders no service, because service is purifying. When I was very young on the path, in the late 70s, I was going through a very difficult time. And I remember Swami Kriyananda came up to me and said, "Forget about yourself and serve." And those words changed my life. My life has been dedicated to service ever since. If we think about ourselves, there's just no end to the complexity and the confusion and the aches and pains. You know, you ever start thinking about, you could start at the toes and go all the way up. There's just no end to it. But instead, forget about it and do the right thing. Love God, serve God. And what happens? There's joy. So why live in the pain when you can live in joy? Render grateful service. Sri Yukteswar said, as long as we are breathing the free air of this world, it is our duty to render grateful service. Never speak of these truths to one who does not care to hear. Ever think about that in yourself? Are you just sort of like, okay, enough of spirituality, where's the television set? Try to cultivate even the desires for entertainment. Try to find something uplifting. Try to do something with people instead of just being glued to the computer or the television screen. Try to interact. Try to serve even as you're being entertained. Give your vibration to people instead of to inanimate objects. Cultivate that desire to hear the truth, to love the truth. When we were with Swami Kriyananda, the greatest joy was to be called to his feet, to hear whatever he was doing, whatever he wanted to share, just to be in that vibration. That's why people come to this temple, to be in that vibration of the masters. When people would visit Yogananda, and it happened with Swami too, they'd have a whole list of questions. Okay, I'm going to ask all these questions. They'd get in his presence, and they'd just... Questions? What questions? Just, they were happy. They were joyful. Cultivate that desire to love the truth, to love to hear the truth. Never speak of these truths to one who speaks ill of me, of God. Rather than ever dreaming of speaking ill of God, rather we should sing to him constantly in our hearts with reverence and joy, and feel that love. Even if you think, oh, I don't have enough love, I'm just an ordinary person, surround yourself with things that will help you develop devotion. Chanting, Swami's talks. There's thousands of YouTube videos of Swami and other Ananda teachers. There's all the books. Swami wrote 150 books, 400 pieces of music. dive into the choir and study these songs. Make them part of your consciousness. Come to the programs that we do here. Sometimes I think we're in the business of creating bliss. That's our job. To create programs that pull in spirit so that people can bask in that vibration of spirit. There are so many things that you can do, but it's always a choice. The spiritual path is like, well, you can visualize it as an arrow going up or an arrow going down. Either your energy is rising towards spirit or it's going down into matter and pain. What's it going to be? It's always your choice. But if we live in God and try to think of Him more and more and read Master's words, Swami's words, and live in that vibration, we find joy. Choose joy in your life.
There's a line in one of Swamiji's songs, and we may have sung it last weekend. Did we sing it last weekend? Yes. Sing the first verse to you again, so we'll have to suffer through it. Walk like a man, even though you walk alone. Why court approval once the road is known? But if they halted home, the goal still awaits you. Go on the road. I could keep going, and I would be happy to, but speak a little. That concept of going on alone is relevant to the topic today because the question is, how democratic is truth? And during the purification ceremony, I gave a slight spoiler alert that not very democratic. We can vote however we like, but truth is truth, and we can align ourselves with it, and it carries us, and it does so very powerfully and very transformatively, or we can not align ourselves with it, and we sort of, life has a way of kind of kicking us in the backside a bit, and we can get kicked down the road of life, or we can flow with it. And this little verse of the song, why court approval once the road is known? Let come who will, but if they all turn home, the goal still awaits you. Go on alone. Swami's not saying we should just, all head out the door and zoom off in different directions forever. He's just saying, don't wait for the crowd of this world to support your spiritual search, your spiritual life. People have zillions of different priorities, and this reading gives us a little clue about people's different priorities. And in the Bhagavad, Christ gives colorful images. Do not give that which is holy unto dogs, and do not cast your pearls before swine. I mean, it's like, whoa, okay, all right. There's, we might think of ourselves in those colorful terms as well, but the Bhagavad Gita gives us a spectrum. Often what we find is that one scripture is showing the on and the off, the black and the white, the two basic choices. And the other scripture is showing the same thing, but it's showing it by degrees along the trail. And as Nirmala pointed out, we can turn the choices in the Gita upon ourselves and say, so, how devoted am I? How willing to hear am I? How often do I speak ill? Some disaster happens or something that I don't necessarily agree with happens, and what do I choose? How do I respond to that? And therefore, we can kind of follow that measuring stick in our own lives. I had an interesting and challenging experience of this when I was first on this path. I had given my dad some things to read that he seemed to enjoy. I gave him things that I thought he would be interested in. Swamiji had a little pamphlet at the time on leadership. Later, Swamiji created the book, The Art of Supportive Leadership, kind of out of that outline, you might say. But at the time, it was just a small book of maybe 15 or 20 pages, little booklet. And my dad really enjoyed that. He thought, this is good stuff. And I sent him another couple little things. Just small, short things that I thought he would enjoy. And he did, very much so. Well, okay, I'm gonna really go for it here now. So I sent him The Path and The Autobiography of a Yogi and, a few of the heavy hitters. And what happened? The next thing I got was a letter from the minister of the church that I grew up in. And my dad had, essentially taken one look at these things and just handed them to the minister and said, here, my dad, ever the executive, he delegated this here. You deal with this. You figure this out. Straighten this kid out. And so I got a letter, a nice, polite letter, but, Lutheran minister, he had his own point of view. He was not afraid to express that point of view. And I thought, and I got up on my high horse briefly and, started composing a vigorous response to this minister, who was a very sincere man and actually very uplifted in his way. He was a very genuine person, so I didn't want to offend him. But as I mentally composed this letter, this is pre-computer, so I wasn't sitting at a keyboard typing things into a word processor, into an email that could be deleted or could be whatever, sent accidentally. It took some effort to compose and then handwrite and then put a stamp on a letter and mail it. I could not write that letter. I could not find a way to write a letter that expressed that I did not agree with him without being disagreeable. I just couldn't get there. And so I didn't respond. I couldn't go after him because, and following the Gita reading, which I had no clue about at the time, he didn't want to hear that. He was not interested in that. He had his path in life. He had chosen that path. He'd followed it faithfully for 30, 40, 50 years, God knows how long. He seemed ancient to me. He was probably all of 55, but whatever. I mean, he was on his path, and that was his path, and God bless him. I couldn't confront that. Well, it took a good probably 25 years to kind of bring my dad around to the point where he was open enough to engage Swami Kriyananda. And they actually spent some really precious time together, and I think came to a good appreciation of each other. But I mean, that was a very slow, very patient process. But we can look in ourselves and say, how attuned is my life? I've noticed that the word attunement does not appear in the dictionary. It's kind of annoying when these really good words, it's like, wait a minute, attunement is not in the dictionary? Excuse me? Well, it jolly well should be, because it's a really, really important concept. We listen to what the universe is trying to say to us, and we try to align ourselves with it. We try to align ourselves with the truth. Not just the truth in some abstract sort of way that, we may agree with or disagree with, but the truth of our own being, the truth of our own divine nature. What is that truth? The only way to find out is to learn to listen. That is what meditation ultimately is. It's the art of listening. It's the art of tuning in. We spend our whole day, and frankly, a lot of our nights as well, talking to God, talking to the universe, ranting, raving, all the messages that we want to give. The mind is going all the time. It's just busy, busy, busy. When do we ever listen? We have to pause and listen. Prayer is marvelous. Prayer is wonderful. But a one-sided conversation is just a tiny bit limited. It's not, we have to, yes, it's good to express what's in our heart, to express to God, make that prayer. But if we never take the time and the trouble to listen for God's response, then we don't ever have a chance to receive it in our lives. So that's, to me, the message of this reading this week. How democratic is truth? It's really not very democratic at all, unless we're really in tune. If we vote with the masses, then, we're going to vote yay one day and nay the next day, and it's just going to go back and forth, and we just keep kind of missing the mark. But if we vote from the inside, and we aim at truth, we may not hit it perfectly, but at least we're going to be in the right zip code. We have to find that in ourselves, and that skill is one that is patiently developed. It's not an immediate thing. Just saying, I believe, does not get that done. That belief is a good place to begin. Fine, sure, good. Belief is good. But only if belief initiates, catalyzes action, and promotes that effort, that sensitive effort, the plowing of the soil inside, the plowing and seeding of the garden on the inside. That's when we really see the results. I want to echo what Nirmala was saying about tuning in. This past week, I had the blessing of helping to build the Temple of Light at Ananda Village. I went up there a few days and put on my tool belt. It was a little crusty. We washed my nail bags. It was 20 years. They needed washing. It was pretty grungy in there. But we were putting the plywood on this curving roof. It was really interesting. I thought, this is a classic Swami project. We're doing something that is not so easy to do. It's not so obvious. I've nailed down a lot of plywood in my life. I have not nailed down a lot of plywood on a curved roof. And you go to cut the plywood off. We thought, okay, well, we'll hang it wild over these hips and we'll just come back and we'll cut it off. Yeah, fine, that's great. But how do you even describe the line that you're supposed to cut? Because it's not a line, it is a curve. It follows a curve. When you cut along what you think is a straight line, the plywood is actually, you have to cut a curve to do that. Trust me. It sounds really bizarre, but it's really actually quite true. We glued the second layer of the plywood. The plywood had to be thin in order to bend it. Anyway, it was a great adventure. It was a great joy. If you can come, please come this week. Even if it's just for one day or one event. We'll be leading the kirtan on Tuesday night up there, and the kirtan will be in the new temple, which will be a magnificent, wonderful blessing. The acoustics in there are going to be incredible. It's just plywood right now, so there's going to be a lot of reverberation, and the place will be packed to the walls. Anyway, it's a great joy and a great blessing. But take part in any of it. If you can't come up there physically, don't come up physically. Tune into it on the internet. If you can't tune into it on the internet, then send your prayers at least. But just find a way to follow that energy, because that energy is a wave moving through our lives, and the blessings are ours for the receiving.